Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and um, this week we're talking about how how certain stigmas can be obstacles in recovery. So the stigma of mental illness, of different of weight, of being a woman, of any number of things that can um, become an obstacle in recovery, because there is a lot of stigma that still exists. We've come very far, but um, it's definitely still true that it would take I think more to admit that, because it's kind of like it shouldn't even have, it really isn't about admitting, and so it kind of, we still think of it in that way. It's like, you know, admitting that you have some kind of an illness, um, in order to defeat the shame involved with it. But there really isn't this inherent sense of shame in within the illness, and there's really not an inherent need to admit something, like you're confessing something that is a personal flaw. And I think even the use of the word admit kind of implies it's a secret. It's there's something to hide. There's something to kind of, there's a darkness to it that you sort of maybe brought on yourself, because that's a lot of the um, admitting to a mistake, kind of, there's so much of that out there still in regard to eating disorders and mental illness in general. Uh, and yeah, I definitely had a hard time admitting. I mean, I've definitely had a hard time saying, that I struggled with mental illness, because I've struggled with mental illness for a long time, and it's it's always felt to me, um, not always, but in the beginning when I was, for a while, um, you know, it was a really blurry line between declaring it an actual problem and declaring it a personal failing or a personal flaw. And that kind of thinking can really hold a person back in recovery. It could really stop them from seeking out recovery, and and if they let it keep a hold over them, excuse me, if they let it keep a hold over them, then it can stop them from having the most beneficial recovery that they can, because they are holding themselves back based on the way they think society sees them, which there are people who do see it as a personal failing. There are people who see it as a weakness, and people who don't know any better and who don't have the insight to look at it and to look at the person as a whole person rather than their symptom, may well ostracize them. If you're very thin, for example, um, and people think that equates being eating disordered, then people might, one, assume that you have an eating disorder, and two, assume that you brought it on yourself, if that's what they think an eating disorder is. So they might assume, for example, that you're vain, and that's just one example of how society has a tainted view of this, and how that very view can hold you back, because can make you feel badly about yourself. This is how people are perceiving me. Um, it's hard to have a solid sense of who you are. You don't have a solid sense of who you are when you're struggling with an eating disorder. So sometimes you could take in those messages and you can internalize them and feel badly about yourself. And there's never any need to feel badly about yourself. It's not your fault that the message out there that's being given to people, that people are not questioning, uh, is skewed. So, yeah, it's definitely an issue. It's definitely an obstacle. It can be an obstacle in recovery when these stigmas about mental illness are so pervasive still. It could definitely affect you, anyone, on an unconscious level. So it's not as though you can just know, oh yeah, the stigma is holding me back. You might know, but you also might not know. So think about it. Think about if that is something that might be holding you back. Take some time and reflect on that. Um, because it's hard to know sometimes how much we're affected by society because society is all we see. So it's all it's all that's there. So we don't really have that much contrast. So we might not know how affected we are by it because we're in it. So we're a part of it. Um, so yeah, I think it's a good idea to take some time to reflect and really think about if if the stigma weren't there, what might you feel free enough to do or say? Reverse it. Think of it that way, and then you might be able to better identify how much stigma is actually impacting you. So just think about how free you might feel if the stigma were not there. I mean, that would be great. That would be wonderful. Then you could just talk about it. You could just say, yeah, this is what I'm dealing with. And it's, imagine that. Imagine zero stigma. And then you see just how much stigma there really is. Because then that highlights the discomfort that is there that we're so used to. So it's kind of like it just default. So yeah, um, try that and see if you could find a way to claim that and to own that. All right. Have a good week, everyone. Bye.